I never imagined my first trip overseas would end with me running for my life in a country I barely understood. It was supposed to be a solo journey of self-discovery. I had just turned 26, quit my boring office job in Pittsburgh, and booked a month-long trip across Eastern Europe. Poland, Hungary, Romania, and finally a week in Bulgaria to slow down and write. I pictured myself journaling in quiet cafes, sipping coffee by cobblestone alleys, living like the locals. I made it to Sofia, Bulgaria, without much issue. The city was beautiful, modern but full of layered history, and the people were friendly, if reserved. I had booked a small guest house near the mountains outside the city for the last leg of my trip. It was cheaper than hotels in the city center, and the photos showed cozy rooms with wooden beams and warm lighting. Authentic Bulgarian experience, the description said. When I got off the bus at the village stop, there was no reception. Just a cracked road, faded Cyrillic signs, and silence. I messaged the host, Miroslav, but got no reply. 15 minutes later, an old, dented SUV rolled up, dusty and rumbling. A man stepped out, tall, maybe late 50s, eyes sunken deep into his face. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. Just grabbed my suitcase and motioned for me to get in. The drive up to the guest house was long and winding. Forest closed in on both sides of the road, the kind of forest that swallows cell signals and daylight. When we arrived, I realized the place didn't look like the pictures. The wood was rotting, and the windows were either shuttered or cracked. But it was late. I was tired. I figured I'd stay the night and leave early. Inside, the air was heavy with a strange damp smell, like mold and something else I couldn't place. Miroslav showed me to my room without a word. The walls were bare. No Wi-Fi. No cell service. Just a small bed, a cracked mirror, and a window facing the dark woods. That night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the hallway. I held my breath, thinking maybe it was another guest. But I hadn't seen anyone else. Then I saw the doorknob twitch. Just a flick. Then silence. I stayed awake until morning. The next day, I told Miroslav I wanted to leave. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "No bus today." His English was broken, but clear enough. "Tomorrow. You stay." I didn't argue. I packed my things and decided I'd hike down myself. I followed the road for what felt like hours, but I never reached the village. Every bend in the road led to more trees, more silence. I turned back, convinced I'd made a wrong turn. When I returned, the house was different. My bag was no longer in the room. The window was nailed shut. And in the hallway, above the cracked mirror, I noticed something new: photographs. Black and white. Dozens of them. All of tourists. People with backpacks. Smiling. Just like me. None of them were recent. None of them had eyes. Each face had been carefully scratched out with something sharp. I ran. Down the stairs. Out into the woods. I didn't stop until I reached a road. I waved down a delivery truck, yelling in every language I could remember. The driver looked confused but let me in. I never filed a report. What could I say? That a man named Miroslav in a Bulgarian mountain guest house may or may not have kidnapped dozens of tourists. That he showed me a room, tried to lock me inside, and I ran? There was no evidence. No photos. My bag was gone. My booking had vanished from the app. When I got back to the States, I searched for the guest house again. Nothing. The listing was gone. The address led to an abandoned building with no roof. But I remember the photographs. And at night, when the world is quiet, I still hear the sound of slow footsteps outside my door.
Incarify was warned not to go to El Salvador. Everyone, from my coworkers in Chicago to the Reddit threads on travel safety, told me the same thing: stay away from the gang zones, avoid rural roads, don't wander at night. But I had my reasons. My father was born there. He left before I was born, and I never met him, but a part of me always felt pulled toward that country, toward understanding who I was, where I came from. I flew into San Salvador with a camera bag, a notepad, and a vague plan to document street life and trace my father's footsteps. I booked a cheap hostel near downtown, and the staff were kind, though they grew strangely quiet when I told them I planned to visit a place called El Rosario, a small town near the Calatenango region. One of the older guests, a man with faded tattoos on his neck, pulled me aside that night. "You gringos come here looking for real stories," he said in Spanish. "But there are places the real world forgot. Places the gangs own completely. You think you'll get a story? They'll make you part of it." I should have listened. I rented a motorbike and rode out early, following the crumbling roads into the hills. It was beautiful at first. Lush mountains, birds echoing in the trees, a countryside frozen in time. But as I neared El Rosario, everything changed. I passed a wooden sign riddled with bullet holes. Spray painted across it in black was one word: La Sombra, the shadow. I parked near a small store with rusted bars over the windows. There were no cars, no children playing, just silence. Inside the store, a man in a torn polo shirt watched me without blinking. I asked about my father, told him his name, showed an old photo. He didn't respond, just slowly looked to the door, then back at me. "You should go," he said. "You're being watched." I turned and saw them, 3 young men on the other side of the dusty road. One had a teardrop tattoo under his eye. Another had something bulging under his shirt. None of them smiled. They just stared. I got on my bike and rode off, trying to stay calm, but I saw them in my side mirror. They were following on foot, and more were emerging out of doorways behind fences. All of them watching. I hit the edge of town and thought I was safe. Then a shot rang out. The sound cracked through the hills like a firecracker. My back wheel swerved. I didn't stop. I pushed the throttle and didn't look back. I made it to a small farm road and hid the bike behind some tall brush. My hands were shaking. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I realized how quiet it was again. Too quiet. I had no phone signal, no GPS, no backup. Then the whispering started. Voices, somewhere nearby, overlapping. I crouched in the brush, trying not to breathe too loud. Through the gaps in the leaves, I saw them, 4 of them this time. All armed. AKs, pistols tucked into their jeans. They weren't looking for me anymore. They were circling me. That's when the real fear kicked in. Not the fear of being shot, but the fear of what comes after. I remembered the stories, the tourists who vanished, the journalists who went missing. Some of them were never found. Others were discovered in shallow graves, their teeth pulled out, their eyes gone. I thought of my mother, of my sister, of how I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going. I thought of my father, and I realized I was chasing the ghost of a man who likely died in this exact way. I stayed hidden for hours, until the sun started to set, until the voices faded. When I finally crept back to the road, the bike was gone. But they left something behind. A small piece of paper, folded and wedged into a crack in the pavement. Written in blocky Spanish, "You don't belong in La Sombra." I made it out of the forest on foot, hitchhiked with a local farmer who didn't ask questions. He dropped me on the edge of San Salvador without ever making eye contact. Back in the city, I didn't tell anyone what happened. I booked the first flight home. I never found out what happened to my father. Maybe he left El Salvador to escape the same darkness I walked into. Maybe he never made it out at all. But now I dream of that road, that bullet, those dead eyes. And every time I do, I hear whispering just outside my window. Same voice over and over. "You were supposed to stay."
I had been in China for 2 weeks, backpacking solo through ancient towns and buzzing cities, trying to immerse myself in the culture beyond the tourist traps. I loved it. The street food. The strange neon glow of the night markets. The language I was slowly picking up, even if I mostly fumbled through it. One night in Chengdu, I wandered off the main road looking for a local food stall my hostel host had recommended. It was a little past 11 p.m., and the air was thick with humidity. I followed a narrow alley lit only by hanging red lanterns swaying in the breeze, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. The smell of garlic, oil, and something vaguely sweet filled the air. But then it shifted, something metallic, wet, and unmistakably wrong. I thought maybe I'd gone the wrong way. The alley grew tighter, darker. The buildings leaned in close like they didn't want me there. Then I heard it. A wet, tearing sound. At first, I thought it was someone cutting meat. Maybe a butcher's stall that hadn't closed yet. But it was too quiet for that. No music. No voices. Just tearing. Slurping. I turned the corner, and what I saw didn't register at first. My brain rejected it, tried to make it into something else. There was a man crouched low, his back to me. He was shirtless, pale, ribs protruding through skin slick with sweat. Before him was another man, naked, unmoving, limbs twisted unnaturally. His torso had been opened like a bag of groceries. The crouching man was pulling chunks from his stomach, shoving them into his mouth with both hands, his face soaked in blood. I froze. Not like in the movies, not a step back and gasp. No, I went cold. Every instinct in me shut down, and all I could do was stare. The man's head slowly turned. His eyes met mine. They weren't wild or crazed. They were clear. Alert. Aware. Intelligent. And then he smiled. I turned and ran. Back through the lantern-lit maze, feet pounding on ancient stones slick with moss and rain. I didn't hear footsteps at first. I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But then I heard him. Fast. Barefoot. Gaining. I didn't know where I was going. The alleys all looked the same, crumbling stone walls, carved wooden doors, red paper lanterns hanging like watching eyes. I could hear him behind me, panting, not like someone tired. More like excited. I burst out onto a wider street. Motorbikes roared past. A group of teens laughed near a convenience store. I didn't stop. I ran straight into a lit corner shop and slammed the door behind me, gasping for air. The shopkeeper looked up. An old man with cataract-clouded eyes. I tried to explain, my Mandarin broke apart under the pressure. I said man, I said blood, I said Chiren, eat person. He stared at me for a long time. Then, without a word, he walked over and locked the front door. He whispered. He saw you. I didn't ask how he knew. He let me sleep in the back room, between stacks of dusty rice bags and crates of lychees. I didn't sleep. The next day, I took a train out of the city. I didn't tell anyone. I deleted all my photos from that night. I didn't want him to find me again. Back home in the States, I kept reading about urban legends in Western China, tales about the Yi-Ren, the hungry ones who live in the forgotten alleys and eat the discarded. I don't know if what I saw was one of them. I don't know if he was human. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see him crouching, feeding. And sometimes, in my dreams, I hear barefoot footsteps coming down the hallway. Getting closer.
When the Montalvos moved in, the neighborhood got quiet in a way that felt wrong. Our street had always been lively, kids on bikes, Mr. Harper watering his lawn at 6 a.m. like clockwork, neighbors waving while unloading groceries. But after the Montalvos arrived, family of 3, no pets, never smiled, something in the air shifted. Heavier. Still. They moved in on a Sunday. No moving truck, just a black van with no windows and mismatched license plates. No one saw them unload. No one saw what was inside. Their house, 313, Willow Lane, had sat vacant for years. People said it was too run down. Termite damage. Mold. But it never looked that bad. Still, no buyers, until now. The first time I noticed something was off, it was almost midnight. I was standing at my kitchen sink with a glass of water, the lights off, just staring out into the street. That's when I saw it, a figure in their window. It wasn't one of them. It was tall. Taller than any person should be, with a neck that stretched upward, back arched like it couldn't fit inside the room. Its silhouette stood completely still in the second-floor window, lit by a sickly orange glow, like firelight. I blinked. It didn't move. I turned away for half a second, and when I looked back, gone. The next day, I told my neighbor Ruth. She brushed it off with a nervous laugh, but her eyes lingered a little too long on their house afterward. Maybe they're just odd, she said. But the sightings continued. Sometimes, I'd see multiple figures in the windows, limbs too long, necks craned in angles that made my spine ache just looking at them. They didn't move naturally. They twitched, stuttered, like something trying to imitate human motion and failing. What disturbed me more was that the Montalvos didn't seem to notice. They went on with their lives like clockwork. Mother gardening with the same dull expression every morning, the child bouncing a ball that never made a sound, and Mr. Montalvo. He just stood at the end of the driveway every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., facing the woods. Never moving. Never blinking. One night, I tried taking a photo. I zoomed in on the second-floor window where I'd seen one of the things. But the moment I tapped the shutter, every light in their house went out at once. Total blackness. No delay. Just click, dark. Then my phone screen cracked. No impact. No fall. Just, cracked, from the inside. And then I felt it, someone watching me from behind. I turned. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. Just lay in bed with every light on, listening to something whispering in a language I didn't understand, beneath the floorboards. A week later, Ruth stopped answering her door. Her blinds were all closed, and her mail piled up. Then one night, I looked out and saw her, standing in the Montalvo's living room. But it wasn't her. Her face was slack, twisted into a permanent grimace. Her arms hung too low, her knees bent backward. One of the tall figures stood behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder like a parent proud of their child. And then they both looked directly at me. I wanted to move. I packed everything. I even booked a hotel downtown just to get away. But when I tried to drive off that night, my tires had been slashed. And carved into the hood of my car, in something dark and sticky. Keep watching. Now I don't sleep. I sit at the window, staring across the street, waiting. The house glows with flickering orange light each night. The windows pulse like eyes, and I swear I can hear a heartbeat echo from the walls. I see them more clearly now. The figures. Dozens of them. Sometimes they mimic the neighbors who've stopped showing up. Sometimes they're just shapes. But the worst is him, the one I call the Watcher. He stands in the attic window every night at 3 a.m., tall, horns curling back from his head, his grin stretching impossibly wide. He doesn't blink. He doesn't move. He just watches. And each night, he gets a little closer to the glass. And each night, I feel a little less like myself. Whatever they are, whatever they're doing over there, it's spreading. And I think they know I'm telling you this. So if you ever move to a quiet street, and the new neighbors don't wave, and their windows glow when they shouldn't, don't look too long. Because once you see them, they see you too.
We weren't the type of family that took risks. We researched everything: flight reviews, resort safety ratings, travel insurance policies. So when my dad booked a family trip to Mexico, an all-inclusive resort in Michoacán, of all places, we didn't think twice. The website showed endless beaches, glowing reviews, and images of margaritas under straw umbrellas. It wasn't until the third day of our vacation that things started to unravel. We'd rented a car to visit a remote village inland, where my mom's great-grandparents were supposedly from. She was sentimental like that. The road was mostly empty, hot, dusty, lined with thick brush and the occasional roadside shrine marked by white crosses and faded photos. I remember the way my dad kept glancing in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" I asked. "Just being careful," he said. But caution doesn't stop them. The white pickup truck pulled behind us as we crossed a narrow bridge, no other vehicles in sight. At first it seemed normal. Until it got closer. And closer. Then it tapped our bumper. My dad tried to speed up. The truck pulled to the side, boxed us in. 4 men jumped out. AR-15s. Face masks. No words. They smashed the window, dragged us out. My mom screamed. One of them pistol-whipped my dad. I tried to fight. I was 17, full of dumb pride. One swing of the rifle butt across my chest sent me into the dirt. They shoved bags over our heads and forced us into their truck. When they removed the bags, we were somewhere in the forest, at a half-collapsed farmhouse. The windows were blacked out, and the floor reeked of gasoline and blood. That's when we saw them, others. A few local villagers. Another tourist couple. A teenage boy tied up and trembling in the corner. They were watching us like they'd given up. Then he walked in. You've seen men like him in movies, the cartel boss with the pressed shirt, sunglasses at night, and the aura of someone who's killed without blinking. But in real life, there's something worse. He didn't speak loudly. He smiled a lot. That's what made it terrifying. He called himself El Cura, the priest. Said it was his job to test people's souls. His men laughed like it was a joke. But the things they made us do weren't jokes. They started with obedience. They handed my dad a machete. Told him to kill a chicken. He refused. So they broke 2 of his fingers with a hammer, slow and rhythmic, until he obeyed. Then they made him do it again. Not to a chicken. To a dog. A pit bull they kept chained outside. My dad threw up afterward. I watched it all. So did my mom. Her hands were duct taped. Her eyes were dead. Then it was my turn. They tied me to a chair and played a video. A man on screen, tied up, bloodied. El Cura handed me a phone. Call the number. Read what I give you. Say he has 24 hours to pay. Or we send the next video. I couldn't. I said no. That's when they brought in the boy from the corner, the other prisoner. Maybe 13. He was crying. One of the cartel men grabbed a knife. Call or we hurt him instead. I called. I read the words. I became part of it. Days passed. Time was a blur of forced threats, beatings, and feeding us just enough to stay alive. They filmed us doing awful things, things I don't remember clearly. I think it's a trauma response. But I still hear the screams at night. Then one day, just like that, they let us go. No explanation. They loaded us into the back of a van and dropped us 10 miles outside a town called Uruapan. We limped to a gas station and begged the clerk to call the police. The police didn't care. They didn't write a report. Didn't ask for names. Just said, "You're lucky. Leave. Go home." We did. Back in the States, we didn't talk about it much. We couldn't. Therapy helped, but there are fractures that don't heal. My dad never gardens anymore. My mom jumps when the phone rings. I haven't been able to hold a knife without shaking. I read later that El Cura was real. A mid-level enforcer turned sadist. Known for making captives prove their worth before ransom or execution. He vanished 2 years ago. Some say the cartel killed him. Others say he still operates in the jungle, testing people's souls. And every now and then, when I hear Spanish spoken low and fast behind me in a store or see a pickup truck with tinted windows slow down beside me, I feel my knees go weak. Because some things follow you back. And some places you don't come back from whole.